Hello everyone, this is AutoML and Training Working Group Community Call on 12th of June. This meeting will be recorded and published on YouTube. This meeting is governed by the Kubeflow Code of Conduct. Welcome everyone. So maybe we can start with a quick introduction. Do we have anyone else here on the call who just want to introduce themselves to the community? Maybe any new people here on the call who just want to say hello?
Victor, independent. I'm used to be here. I joined before, but since Audrey, you've been joining the CNCF communities, which makes this even more interesting than before. So I'm just coming back to learn more.
Thank you, Victor. Nice to see you here in this calls.
Yeah. So I think I can go. So I'm Shravan. I work with Apple. So I'm just starting to be more involved with the training side of things as well. So I'm wondering, I think I'm kind of I help Andre with some of the activities on a day-to-day basis. I think I'm especially interested in the V2 side of things, where training V2 APIs are heading, and I think maybe and generally learn about the ecosystem. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Shravan, for joining. Anyone else want to say hello? All right, then we can get started. So feel free to add, update the attendance lists in our meeting notes, and also like if you want to propose some agenda items to discuss today, also feel free to update the items. So first of all, like I want to say a couple of things about like the updates in the community. So we recently decided to migrate to CNCF Slack, which is actually a huge win for us for the long term. But the Kubeflow Slack was active for the last almost like 6 years. And we have like so many people there, and we try to gracefully migrate everyone to the new CNCF Slack. So if you're using Kubeflow, if you know people who actually using some part of Kubeflow, let them know that we're going to use the new Slack channels. And just to give you the instructions how you can join the CNCF. So I added the link here on our community meeting notes, how you can join this new Slack. So this is like very simple. You just need to join the CNCF Slack, and then we created several channels for every Kubeflow subcomponent. Like for example, I have a channel for Katib, we have a channel for training operator, I have a channel for notebooks. So we decided to start with a small number of channels. Like we decided to start with, so for the training operator and API operator, we decided to create Kubeflow training channel. So we can see how the community actually engage in the channels and how we can be more closer to our users. And which is like more importantly, this channel will preserve the history, which means like if you have any questions in the future for training operator or API operator, any kind of training related question, you can always search for previous discussion, and you can as well, like basically all the threads will be saved. So please join this new CNCF Slack, and let us know if you find any issues with these new channels. Yeah, any questions on the migration? Any maybe suggestions to the community that we need to address? All right. So yeah, the next thing about the release, we almost ready with the 1.7 and 0.17 release for Katib and training operator. So in training operator, like we recently noticed one issue with the webhook. So the problem is like we integrated a new validation webhook in the training operator, which we run in addition to training operator controller. So the one issue that we noticed is that for some cases, when you deploy training operator within the Kubeflow, webhook just doesn't work. So anyone else here on the call actually try to use training operator like in this RC, or you haven't tried to use because I'm wondering, did you see any similar error on your installation scripts?
I've asked Ajay to verify the standalone installation as well, not just Kubeflow, so we'll just get to know that. if something got screwed up there, but it is pretty strange. Every other resource is present, and I'm not really sure why that is happening. Why a webhook is acting weird.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think the issue might be that's maybe some policy issue, networking issue, because like we asked for a certificate and it was generated correct, right? So I was able to install the training operator with the Kubeflow installation,
Oh, I see.
but but without the profilers, the profile controller. In it was working for me. So maybe I can try to install it with profile controller.
Right. Is there some other network settings? But I'm not sure if others haven't seen this issue. Yeah, I think it would be great if you can try it as well.
Yeah, that's right. Any other bugs or problems you notice in this new RC, in RC0?
Oh, Helen also reported something similar in Cative.
I'm not sure. Yesterday I'm trying to run the get started example of Cative, and the response shows that it cannot convert the like the request into the job template. So I'm not sure whether it's same error at this one.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
see. Did you create? Yeah, you started a
Which
thread.
Kubernetes version is it, Helen?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Which Kubernetes version do you try? Which Kubernetes cluster?
I use Minikube on my local computer.
Can you verify the version of the Kubernetes in that?
Okay, I will verify that in a minute.
Sure. Yeah, kubectl. I think the cluster info, a kubectl version should show that. Yeah, so it's something, it's not exactly the same error, but again, something on the webhook itself. So I'm thinking like something, is there, are you trying standalone version of the Cative here? Let me check.
Yeah, I think like the problem that Helen reported is about like the environment variables, so I think it's different. So the problem that Ajay reported, it's about the webhook just doesn't work completely, and the problem is on the validation side. So maybe like it's some problem with the SDK or with with the experiment by itself, right?
Right.
It's a different errors, right?
Yeah. The other one, yeah, that's true.
So let me follow up offline on this, Helen, like to this error about like the webhook, the incorrect parameters for trial template, right?
Yeah.
Right, and for error that Ajay actually so I will try to install training operator within Kubeflow, the whole like profile controller.
Right, you can use the same command, basically installs everything, right? So that like don't miss any components. I'm not sure whether it's something else which is creating issue.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So we're planning to cut the RC1 this week, because like we recently cherry picked some of the changes on the RC1, specifically. Let me show you quickly. So we cherry picked the volcano problem, like when we updating the queue, also like new Python version, and some bug fixes for pip install command. So if we don't see any other problems or bugs, I think we just need to cut the official release this week, once we do the RC1 and the testing. So I think for Katip, we cherry picked, let me see, release 0.17. Yeah, so we just cherry picked these three PRs, which is just the fixing scikit-learn version, and the support Python 3.7, 3.11, and dropping 3.7 support for SDK. So, Jonathan, did you try to test Katip or not yet?
Ajay was doing that. I didn't try this.
Okay, that's right. Right. Please let us know if you see any issues or problems with RC, especially in distribution testing phase, so we can address them. And we will planning to cut Kubeflow release, I think, next week, if I remember correctly. So anything else you want to talk about before we jump to the V2 proposal? Yeah, 1.30. You tested right. 1.30. So I think it should work. Let me follow up on this Helen offline just to see if it's going to work. If the issue will be resolved.
We haven't tried it, Andre. Have you tried it? This is very latest. So
Yeah.
something might have, because I think looks like some pod template, something got changed or something. We have to see that, because the environment variable that Helen is reporting is on the inside the pod template, if I get it right. So we have to check this.
All right. Yeah, I think it's let me take a look, but eventually, yes, you're right. Like we're kind of like supporting the Kubernetes version 1.20, 1.27 to 1.29. So we haven't tested 1.30. Yeah, so we just need to see if it's going to work. All right. Yeah. Also, like I think review. So maybe like review GSOC proposals PR. Yeah. So we have 5 created PRs. I think like we slowly try to review all of them, and we try to work with all of you to see how we can start the implementation. So I think what would be helpful from the community if you can also help us to review these PRs. So specifically, I'm talking about these 3 PRs for KTIP project, where we want to enable the push-based metrics collection. Then we want to add the tuning API for LLMs, like the idea of we have the train function and training operator which we can simplify the fine tuning for users. What we want to do next, we want to like give user functionality to optimize the hyperparameters of during the fine tuning iteration, where KTIP can help you. So the idea is like we try to provide a simple, again, Python API to do the parameter optimization. This is the proposal for this project. Also, we have a proposal for different parameter distribution, like log uniform, uniform, and other parameters that other hyperparameter optimization frameworks support today in Aptuna, for example, or in HyperOpt. And we have 2 proposals in training operator repo, which is the one is for generating the documentation for Python SDK. So which will make much simpler for users to explore like these public functions from our Python SDK. And we also have the proposal to supporting JAX or the training operator. So we definitely need the help from the community to review these PRs and to review these enhancement proposals. So if someone can, help us and drive this review, that will be really helpful. And also like start to do some implementation for these features. Yeah, but overall, I think it will be significant benefits for training operator and KTIP. And I think after these changes for KTIP, we're planning to have a V1 version of KTIP project, where we probably do some refactoring of API and finally having some stabilized API, at least for hyperparameter optimization that we were thinking about for a very, very long time when we started this project back in 2018. So please take a look, and would be really helpful if you can just review some of these enhancement proposals. Okay, anything else you want to talk about before we jump to this V2 API design? All right. So just to give you like an update, I think we were talking about this for a very long time already. We started this back in, I think we started talking about this after the KubeCon in Paris in March. So I think like just to give you again like the rough idea, we're trying to see how training operator can be integrated with the job set. And the job set is the new workload which Batch working group created, which gives you an ability to run multiple jobs within the group. This is pretty like useful for HPC, like high performance computing tasks, or AIML use cases, like distributed training, fine tuning, and all this large scale training when you require to have multiple pods in a gang scheduling and basically distributed training across multiple Kubernetes workloads. So we try to see how we can unify our infrastructure level to be delegated to the job set. Because just to remind you, right now, training operator is responsible to not only to actually accept the PyTorch jobs or TF jobs, but also responsible to schedule the pods, reconcile them, do all the orchestration for specific policies, like failure policies, success policies, and all other policies that kind of like apply for distributed training use cases. So we try to see how this work could be delegated to the job set, and also have some framework specific parameters on the Kubeflow level. So for example, if we want to support elastic training from the PyTorch, which other frameworks just don't support, or some specific cases for API when we need to do API exec command. So this is like the rough summary of what we try to do, and also like, you know, all these APIs for LLM fine tuning, integration with like model registry, like additional APIs which will be useful for data scientists. And job set just cannot integrate, like cannot like implement them because they try to, because it's kind of like out of scope of the job set workload. So I have a few design proposals here that we kind of like discussing recently. So the first one is using the train job new kind, which will be inside a Kubeflow. And this train job, like we think about how the API might look like for data scientists. So we want to like define some specific framework policy. Like, for example, we know that different frameworks, they have a different like, capabilities, how they do distributed training. Like in the PyTorch, you have a thing called like torch run, where you need to define n proc per node parameter, like how many processes you want to run in a single worker. Also, you can define like elastic policy, like what kind of rendezvous backend you want to use, is it like collective communication or like API or anything else. And other parameters like very specific to the framework, to the PyTorch, like in this specific example. Also, we want to do similar to like TensorFlow, like JAX, XGBoost. So data scientists, they will see like similar API what they have on the framework level, but inside like the train job level. And the idea is to not actually replicate the whole job set spec under the train job, because some parameters we believe don't need to be exposed to the end user. Like, for example, like parameters such as parallelism, right? Because like eventually, if you just do the distributed training, you need to like, you kind of like, you already know how many jobs need to be completed and parallelized. And some of the parameters just don't need to be exposed. So for these specific things, we try to not like replicate the whole job set here, but just provides like parameters which will be only like the scope of distributed training, right? Like, for example, number of replicas, right? Or backoff limits. Any questions so far? Like, feel free to stop me, like maybe, yeah, Chandu, go ahead.
Hi. Is there a how to doc to play around with these operators, APIs?
Yeah, so usually this API is kind of like the customer resource API, right? So we right now in the stage where we're designing this API spec, like we're just trying to see how this API might look like, and then we need to integrate the operator, like the Kubernetes controller, right? So we need to like implement the logic for this customer source definition, right? So yeah, I think Chana, we can't hear you because you're on mute.
Oh, in that case, do you have any how to doc? Just I want to go through the how to doc and play around with the existing operators to familiarize with the.
Yeah, so we have this developer doc in the training operator repo.
Okay.
So
Okay, I will go. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So this actually will help you to just get started with some APIs, with existing APIs.
Yeah.
So I think our question right now is how so because there are different type of the success policies, for example. We have like the success policy on the train job level, on the group of job level, and we have a pod failure policy, like we have failure policy on the whole kind of job level, and pod failure policy on the very specific job, like the pod level. Like for example, if you for like PyTorch Elastic, sometimes you can define like very specific policies which affect only like the specific group of pods. So right now we just try to see how this job level specific policies could be implemented. So we will actually not confuse users of like different policies and how they just need to use them, right? So do we have anyone here on the call who just can try to actually run the large scale distribute training with different failure policies, and maybe just provide some feedback for us to understand like your specific use case?
Do we need any specific
Mhm.
do we need any specific computers for that? Like any hardware is required for that, or local machine is sufficient?
Yeah, so can you repeat please the first part? We can't hear you well. Yeah, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you right now.
I think the question was, what is the resources needed to build this one? Is that correct?
Yes. So did you ask about any hardware resource? Oh yeah. So no, we don't need any hardware resources to test this out. So local machine definitely would work with the implementation, like to help us because you can run everything on client, right? And you can run everything on CPU. So you don't need to. You probably cannot test the some features, like for example, you cannot test the collective communication from NVIDIA, right? Because you don't have like CUDA and you don't have GPU. But like if you just want to like test the operator, yes, it is possible. I think first of all, before the implementation, we need to like agree on the API design, right? Like we don't know how to simplify it is more so users like data scientists like won't get confused. So we think that data scientists probably will never interact with the YAML. Like this is true. So data scientists will probably use Python SDK, right? Which we can like do additional abstractions on top. But at the same time, like we need to like be consistent between like the train job and the SDK, and between like different like levels of our API. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sai. Feel free to ping us. Feel free to use the Slack channel to discuss like how we can help here this proposal. So I think like, so what is the next step you think Jonas should be here? Like, do we want to start some initial implementation of what we're proposing, or how do you think we should iterate?
Okay, Yuki is not here, so I think we can put a proposal and then in the repo, right? I think, and maybe like just open it to the community and maybe keep it for a week.
Mm-hmm.
What do you suggest?
Yeah, so for finalizing the design and just like asking people to review the enhancement proposals, right? Enhancement proposal in the repo, right? Yeah, I think so the biggest question is like for us, like what is the user? What is the value, right? Like what is the additional value we have on top of the job set, right? Mhm.
Yeah, that's exactly like my concern as well. I see lots of configurability here, and it makes the developer life easy. But from a user perspective, it is not solving any of the problems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. So I think like we try to also see how this is like our initial. We also try to integrate some training runtime reference. I think we haven't talked about this on this call before, but I think like our idea was to give a user flexibility between customizable runtimes and the ability to specify the whole spec. So what is the idea of the training runtime? So if you're familiar with, for example, Kserve, so Kserve has a concept called the cluster runtime reference, where developers and the operator administrators, they kind of like predefine the runtime, which can be reused inside your model inference when you do when you actually serve your model. Which means like sometimes in this runtime you do define all the specific, Docker images, all the specific configuration that is required for you to serve your model. So what we're thinking about for the training runtime, and we have some examples below. Where is it? So on the training side, usually like the runtime where you're executing your training code could also be predefined, like the list of the configuration and Docker images, right? Like imagine we kind of like provide you runtime for PyTorch training, right? So we're pre-creating all of the Docker images. We're pre-creating all of the specific dependencies for the PyTorch. So from the user side, you just kind of like have your PyTorch code, and you can scale it on the using the train job custom resource, right? So the experience looks like something like this. You just kind of like define the name of the runtime and define the namespace where this runtime is running. Yeah, go ahead, Shaman.
Yeah, hi. So one question on this, I'm wondering, so I think the so this is, if I understand correctly, this is the integration with the job set, right? So
Yep.
for all operations, so to speak, like all for training, tuning, and surveying at a high level. So then is it that should we does it make sense to, I mean, because it's called train job, I'm wondering if it was meant to be only for training and or tuning workloads, or are we looking to sort of abstract everything
Yeah.
towards job set, or is it just a subset of the operations?
Yeah, that is what we try to do. We try to descope, like we try to define the workload just for training. I mean, fine tuning is also part of the training, right? So like very specific part of like, AI lifecycle, right? So we're not to try, like use train job for example, HPC use cases, right? Like we're not trying to offer you train job to build the batch, for example, like large scale batch systems, right? Or anything like on top. We try to descope it like specifically for training, and offers a simple API which users can use to do the distributed training, right? And maybe some additional functionality on top that the job set probably just cannot implement. Right?
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
that is why. Yeah, good.
So I'm wondering if that I think one discussion that we just happened, I think what John also mentioned, where it doesn't make sense, the user doesn't see any benefit.
Yep.
I'm wondering if whether we should look at the other way, where by integrating with job set, are we does Kubeflow gain any more benefits in the future, or is it just a point in time switch to reduce maintenance?
Yeah, so I guess like it still will. I mean, if we're speaking about the scope of distributed training, it still will give some value, right? Like we can still, for example, like implement API which gives user an option to maybe define a model registry, or like a model location from which we want to like fetch the model, right? Or maybe give user an API to integrate with, I don't know, TensorBoards or any other like some sort of the specific tools which be like unique to the training, right? But like the more importantly, so this is an example how job set can be used today within PyTorch, right? So the problem is like some of the parameters should not be translated to the user, like for example parallelism, right, and completions. So some of these parameters should not be part of the distributed training use case because it always has the same parameter, right? Also like the environment variables, right? Like usually users, they don't need to know how to properly configure these environment variables. So they can execute the PyTorch directly on Kube, right? So some of the things needs to be abstracted. That is why we kind of like created this framework policy where basically the scientists can like define the familiar parameters if they know the PyTorch ecosystem, right? Or like TensorFlow ecosystem. And they don't need to like learn how to, of course, like this could be solved with the appropriate like user documentation, right? This is true. I think the question is like, what does the API of train job should look like from the training perspective, right? And I think we discussed before that unification might not work for everything, right? Because like, what if tomorrow will be a new way of do training, which will require additional like orchestration, right? And the problem is like jobs that probably cannot implement it, right? So
I see.
Yeah.
I have Andre, I have a question on the framework policy. The whole idea for the framework policy is to list out every environment specific details here so that we are abstracting out these details from the job set.
Yep.
Is that okay?
But in that case, I mean, in that case, is the goal to be an alternative for the SDK, or then that would motivate the community to make this more easier to use, or is it the goal to not maintain all of these framework specific CRDs separately?
Yeah, I think it should be complementary, right? So like, yes, SDK, I mean, SDK, yes, it's like SDK should exist for data scientists. And like, I strongly believe that, data scientists will always, interact with SDK by like interacting between the Kubernetes and the data scientists, right? I think so the point that, for example, Yuki made before, that the value that he sees in this, that the people who also build who actually builds the application levels, right, on top of the Kubeflow, right? For example, they're building the API server for distributed training, right? They usually just don't know how to properly configure the job set. Like they don't probably know how to properly configure the master. What is master address? What is the master port, right? Like how to properly configure these parameters. And they usually know, and they don't know, like, for example, like the parallelism and the completion should be the same. So that is why for them it will be useful if you have like some sort of simplified API on top, right? So they can only specify like the PyTorch policy, right?
I see, that makes sense. I think I get your reasoning. Okay.
And also like sometimes again like additional orchestration, right? Like what if we require to do like additional orchestration on top inside the controller, right? Which is the key cannot implement, right? This is also like a problem. Like what if we need to, for example, create a config, like for example, how we do an API today. I think we have an example here. Yeah, we don't have it here, but let me try to search it. But then like an API, we're creating the role binding and the config map, so we can make sure that execute the specific commands inside the launcher of the API job. So this is also probably, yeah.
I see, I understand. So you want to have the controller act as like an additional orchestration step to install related resources.
Yeah, based on the policy, right, that we define in the framework policies, right?
Okay.
So I see we have a few users from Red Hat here. Like I think we discussed previously with Kelly about your use cases. Do we have anyone here on the call who just maybe speak about their experience from the user side?
From Red Hat?
Yeah, from your usage of PyTorch jobs today, and maybe.
I am part of the pipeline teams and joined this meeting only as a listener, so I'm not part of that team. So no information from my side.
All right. Yeah, Ted, maybe what about you? Can you maybe share, like, I remember we discussed last time about your experience, right?
Yeah.
But from your, like, from the application developer, like, can you share more from the user side of things, like how do you use the PyTorch jobs today?
Yeah, I can give you, let me find one example, show you, because we use PyTorch job. We do build our own image. So we don't use the image provided, right? So so I'm not quite sure when you say build, you will pre-build an image, and what that means to us, that I'm not sure. But right now, I think in our own image, when we run the PyTorch job, we have a launcher, and then we can set specific parameters for training, like for example, number of processes, that kind of stuff. So maybe let me find one example, and I can show you.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's take a look. So I guess like you're talking about you have like some launch command, right? They execute to in your PyTorch job workers, right?
Wish I can prepare. I'm trying to
Yeah,
find one.
no worries. I think I'm more asking about like experience, but let's take a look.
No, I mean I can show you my YAML file, and then that probably will help you understand this.
Yep.
I'm probably not the best one to explain all this, how it works behind, but I can definitely show you one example, because I often testing this. There it is. Hmm. Okay, yeah, I found. Let me send you a link.
Yep.
So maybe you can help me understand too. If we, so that would be one example.
I see. So I think like the idea is to maybe share my screen. So this is what we see here. So this is like about the SFT, right? I guess so. So okay, exporting a training image from step 1.7 config map. So you have this config.json, right?
Right.
And this config.json has the parameters for the PyTorch, right? I guess so.
And the training arguments, yeah. Training argument, because this is we package transformer.
Yep. I see. So this is like the parameters for trainer, basically, right? For
Right.
the transformer, right? For the high phase transformer. And then you're passing this as a config map, right? And then you just, I guess, read this in your image right here.
Yeah, that's correct. And we build our own image. Yeah, we packaged all of our dependencies inside the image. Torch, transformer, accelerate, flash
Yeah.
attention, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but this is not to distribute training because it uses only like the master and no single replica, right?
It could be, yeah, you could add a worker to make it become a distributed training. But right now in this example, we just make it simple for developers to run.
So how do users run this? Do they run like via like kubectl, like using kubectl, or they have some sort of API server to run these resources? I guess like they're just using the kubectl apply command, right? To execute.
Yeah, right. I mean, for the average user, for the public user, they, if they want to test this image or this Python package, they just use this very simple example YAML file to run through this. Yeah. Internally how the product team uses this exactly, I'm not sure. Probably a similar way.
Yeah, I see. And I guess like you have some other examples with the with node affinity, right? With some other like container parameters, right? But this is like, okay, this is not, so you're not using any kind of failure policies, right? Or so what if, like, for example, user needs to modify some Kubernetes parameters, right? Like, for example, how do they know that they need to modify the nvidia.com like resources, right? Like add an additional GPU. So they have instructions for them, or how they usually interact with it with this?
Because usually I'm not sure because our own cluster, we have GPU, so we provide this example. And but if some user using Kai, they can still run it, but they have to disable the node affinity and also disable the GPU request in the resource, and also some parameters may affect some parameter in the config. It also utilizes GPU, so you may have to disable that too. Like, for example, the flash attention. Yeah, that has to be disabled as well.
So how do they know like that they need to disable node affinity? Like, do they come to you, or do they just
They have to read the documentation.
Okay, they have to read the documentation, right? They have to understand like what kind of parameters they need to modify, like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I see.
And we have, those examples is for anyone to, run through this with GPU or without GPU.
Yep.
Most people don't need GPUs, yeah. So
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, so I guess like so there are two types of use cases, right? Like there are the ways how people maybe use Python, right, to interact. So I guess like so from my perspective, like data scientists usually they just want to use SDK, right, to interact with the control plane. Unless they really need to create some, or maybe had a very specific use case that the SDK cannot offer. Because I think like the question is like, so what is the like when we need to like ask users to directly use kubectl, or we can provide all these abstractions on top, right?
yeah, because I don't think this example is made for data scientists. It is made for some requirement from software developers, for example, or from different teams. Yeah, but maybe not for data scientists specifically. So it looks very complicated. A lot of knobs you can tune.
Yeah, that's right. Because I think like going back to this API, so we try to again like make it simple, but at the same time give you like a similar like flexibility that you have, like ability to give you like ability, like for example set a node affinity, right? Like some, because like here you can see you have like the whole pod template spec. So under each, so every, just to give you like a little structure, right? So I have so this is train job, right? So here I have the framework policy, where we define like very specific parameters to the framework. Then we have like success policy, which affects the whole train job. Like, for example, if you want to say my job needs to be succeeded when all of the jobs is complete, right? The scaling policy, failure policy, how many like restarts, also like what kind of queue they want. So managed by is like similar, like what other job set has the parameters. For example, this could be useful to support multi-cluster orchestration. But because I know that queue can orchestrate the workloads between multiple clusters. So how to have this implementation actually, you can use training operator to orchestrate workloads on the multiple clusters. Like maybe you have like one specific cluster with like thousands of GPUs, and you can use this multi-queue to orchestrate. Also have this kind of like parameters for like when we needs to like for how many like for how much time job needs to leave after the completion, right? And we have the parameters for every replicated job, because usually like in distributed training, right, you have like a master pod, like, or maybe a launcher and the workers, right? So this gives you a flexibility to specify like every replicated job. Like, for example, I have a worker where you say how many like replicas you want to have in the worker, and also again like backoff limits. So kind of like a parameters which specific to like to this specific job, right? Because as again the orchestration of job set looks like you have a job set which orchestrating the jobs, the by jobs, and then the by jobs actually creating the pods, right? So every replicated job is actually like a different type of job, right? And the spec here looks like you kind of like have a spec for your job, where you define like the pod failure policy and the template of your job, where you define like your pod template spec, right? So what we try to do, we try to like remove all the parameters which will not be specific for training, specific like in distributed training, right? As I said before about like the parallelism and completion, and try to see what parameters we need to offer, right? Because we don't need to have like the whole job set spec for you to use, right? Yeah, so I think what will be useful maybe that if you can like let us know about like distributed training use cases, specifically, you know, like what parameters you're using today. Like, do you use failure policy, for example, right? Where you use them, right? Like what kind of, you know, what kind of things are missing. I remember Kelly previously was talking about pod failure policy, right? When she needs to like specify like very specific failure policy when on the exit code, right?
Yes.
So I think that would be useful for us to understand use cases and
Yeah.
see with which we can start with, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I can ask her that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk to her. Because I think we have a couple of 1PRs related to that, that feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So feel free to, again, like feel free to start the thread in the Slack channel. Maybe we can like, you know, follow up offline. And I think it will be useful to like understand the use cases and the story behind it.
Sure.
Yeah, I know we almost over time. So I think for this, I will try to also like update the finalize the doc. And as Jonas said, maybe we can propose some API changes as an enhancement proposal and start to work on some implementation of the new API design. Any last questions, comments you want to add?
One question on the
Mm.
I suppose the versioning where, so let's say V2 API is here using the job set. Does it mean that the SDK versions are going to be incompatible for a time period?
Yeah, that's right. So I think like we want to like, so SDK also will be incompatible and as CRD also will be incompatible. That is why we're creating the V2 Beta 1 API for the train job. So we need to think about SDK, but we probably like create maybe we will publish 2 versions of SDK for some time. But we need to think about the compatibility between like multiple versions, right?
Okay, got it.
Yeah. But I think once we have CRD design, like we can easily work on SDK as well, right? And SDK will be much simpler because we don't need to support multiple CRDs. We just need to support one CRD with the different specs, right?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I think I wasn't sure if the releases for SDKs are tracked separately. But if that's not already added in the doc, I could add that as something to consider.
Yeah, that's right. And we right now like releasing, we're releasing SDK together with the controller. So
okay.
Yeah, but users can always like use the master, like the basic like the changes from main branch, if they want to get the latest changes of the SDK. Yeah.
Got it.
But anyway, so let's try to work on this doc. I also will try to work with the batch working group to get their feedback. And maybe we can submit some proposals to to hear the feedback from the community on this new API structure for the train job. All right. Thanks, Ryan, for your time. Thanks for discussing. I think it was great. So let's definitely follow up on Slack, Ted, if you can, to start the thread. And thank you for helping us with this. So, all right. Thanks for your time. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks.
Thanks.